Hey, Philip.
Hey, buddy.
Hey.
Thanks for having me here.
Oh yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
I was thinking about you. I wanted you and Charles, and there's another guy I work with in the Air Force to get on a podcast about the importance of communication when you're a technician, because
Okay.
that's an underrated skill. A lot of people don't realize how critical it is.
It's probably the most critical.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say you're a new technician and you go on the job site and the customer, a lot is on the line and they're depending on you. The first thing you need to do is build rapport on them before you ask for the machine to start wrenching to make them feel comfortable.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Yeah. Uh, the I think probably uh, one of the better ways to earn rapport, especially with a new technician, is to always make yourself available to them as a tool, allowing them to have that freedom um, to be able to call anytime they need help and not I think it just helps take some of the edge off, especially if it's a new industry for them.
Yeah. So when you're training a brand new technician and you've got them in the service van and you just met them and they're a little nervous because they realize there's 15 pages they got to go through to do inventory, 10,000 pages of spec sheets. What do you do to make them feel more comfortable as you're driving to the first job?
I just basically kind of go over how it is that I start to prepare myself in my mindset, um, starting to think about the what type of call that it is I'm going to, so that I can start kind of getting an idea of what I might be looking at before I even get to the job. And so those are some of the things I think that, especially if it's a new technician, not just to whatever company or industry, but somebody who's green period, who has never done any type of that kind of work before. It's always a good idea to start kind of wanting to know or anticipating what it is that you're going to be driving up on. And that way what you do, that just kind of helps bolster your confidence by the time you get to the customer.
Yeah,
And that's a way, of trying to make the customer feel better from the very beginning. Uh,
that's what Charles did with me. He like I was nervous. I didn't know what I was gonna run into, but he just talked to me and let me know that he told me just to get out there, but he would break into conversation as soon as it even started to get confused. He wouldn't wait for me to fumble. He would break in and help me out before in the pre-fumble, so I knew everything was
Sure.
gonna be okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then,
I mean, it's very important, especially with new technicians, um, because ultimately, like, you're there to help them succeed, uh, because ultimately team success looks better for your boss. And it's something I've always kind of said in the service field industry is that you have two bosses. You have the customer, and then your direct supervisor.
yeah,
And those are the two you need to make happy. And it's paramount that you really do communicate uh, with your peers, because that's going to be the best way to achieve both of those goals.
I agree. And another thing, you said the team of communication looks good to the boss, but like as a technician, you'll have a large, you have a customer that needs a lot of work, and they'll be a long-term customer, 20, 30-year relationship. And by having a team relationship, that makes that customer feel comfortable long term because they know whoever Matt or the team leader brings in, they're going to have that same positive attitude that you had when you were there.
Yes, very much so. I I can't think of. I mean, you're always going to have um, problem customers, and you know the the best way to do that is then communicate with your boss that this is what you're running into with this customer, so that inevitably that customer is going to be calling your boss. And so communication again is then key, not only with your peers and such, but it's also important to be communicating with your bosses.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause your boss is there for you and you're there for your boss. It's a mutual relationship.
Yes, it is. I mean, it has to be, or neither one will be in their position very long.
And you know, another thing about when I first started with Charles, when I met the first customer, I realized, because I didn't know what I was walking into. And I realized, okay, all I got to do is act like him and everything will be okay. All I got to do is walk up, smile, and say, "What do you need?" And look him right, just look him in the eyes and sincerely listen to him and try to help him. And that's the first half of your job is learn within 5 minutes.
Yeah, very. I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, the you know the being able to present um, confidence from the very beginning is going to set kind of the behavioral relationship you're going to have with that customer throughout your period there.
Yeah,
And that's the one thing you always want to make sure is that they're comfortable having you there. Because the last thing you want is to, the company be charging them by the hour, sometimes $200-300 an hour, and they don't really have the confidence that you know what you're doing, and they feel like you're training on their dime. And that's another reason why it's good when you're training a new technician is setting them up to be able um, to meet that kind of criteria from the beginning. That they can put the confidence forward. You have the communication. You've already given the invitation for them to be able to contact you in case they need something, and that availability and I think is very necessary, and sometimes I think is overlooked at times
yeah,
um, when somebody who may not necessarily understand the importance of communication and leadership. When you're training somebody, you are taking up a leadership role,
yeah,
and those are the things. And you may have to talk to a new technician 5, 6, 7 times on one job,
yeah,
and that needs to be okay. That's okay for them to continue to do that. It's okay for them to continue to do, because eventually, it usually doesn't take very long, just a couple 3 months or so, and that person is usually on off and running on their own,
yeah,
especially if their skill set's pretty solid. If they're having trouble with their skill set, I think that's uh, an area that you can take. I think it's a teaching moment. You
right.
know, you can kind of explain how to do something, and wait for that moment where it'll click with them. And then once they get that, once they realize that, I need this arrow in my quiver, I need this tool in my bag, like, then that's when they can really start to project confidence when they go out and get before the customer.
Yeah. And another, it's important to train them how to put the customer at ease initially, even if they're new, because that way that they can have the customer at ease, knowing that you're going to do your best for them and that they can contact you if something's wrong. You're not just some new guy that's going to disappear into the sunset and leave $1,000 bill. Right.
Right, exactly.
You if something's wrong and you'll come back and make it right. That just puts the customer at ease and it puts you at ease.
Yeah, and something I tend to, I would say, uh, you know, when communicating with the customer, they may say, "Oh, how long have you been working here?" And you just say, be general in ideas of saying things like, "Oh, I've been in the industry for dot dot dot, however long," and because exactly that point you were just saying, they don't. If you haven't been with the company long, that already doesn't bolster confidence in the for the customer, and that's an area where you really need just from the beginning. That's very important to have that confidence from the very beginning, and staying in general terms um, is really good when you're explaining maybe cost of repair. Getting into the details, I think, is important to do with the customer.
Yeah, yep, that's very important.
Yeah, and because I think that also bolsters confidence that you know what you're talking about, even if they don't know what you're talking about. And and uh, and that's kind of an on-the-job skill, I would probably say. If you've never done it before, that's just something you'll have to learn while you're doing it.
That's why your trainer, ideally, they can look at all the service calls and try to time a scenario where you'll run into watch them do that. And they want to do that and say the third, like, let you get your feet wet for a couple days. Maybe the third day you're there, they bring you in to watch them do that. So then you want to absorb the basics first and learn how to greet the customer and, like, bring to the friendlier customers or easier jobs. And once you have that down, about 3 days in, when they're starting to get an idea how things work, teach them that. And they won't be a veteran immediately, but they'll have a good idea that they can fall back on later. It'll help, even if they're not perfect.
Yes, yes, that's exactly it. Like I did just a small repair for a friend here recently, and um uh, saw something on this. It was a lawnmower, and I saw something on the lawnmower I've never seen on any other engine.
Yeah,
And uh, but what I was able to do was recognize what it was, and then be able to diagnose the problem, and then be able to tell my friend what it was so that he felt better when we had to order the part.
yeah,
Uh, and then it wasn't a very expensive part either, but there was a need for replacement rather than uh, uh, just being able to spit, shine it clean, and call it fixed.
yeah. The customer doesn't feel good when you go, yeah, I had to replace the flux capacitor and the quantum entanglement drive. That's $4,000. They don't feel that good.
That is correct.
Yeah,
And flux capacitors are kind of hard to find these days.
yeah. Be like, we had to get a special order flux capacitor for your machine. It'd be $4,500. They'd be like, what did
Exactly.
you do? Well, the machine doesn't work without it, sir. Like, no, they want to hear that you need that to communicate, for the motor to communicate with the computer, or something in between. Just explain it to them enough that they feel that they understand that there was a repair and there's not just some jargon in the bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you were in the field, what kind of stuff was it that you found in your working environment that bothered you, especially when you were a new technician, when Charles was training you?
That's a good question. So there was a large factory. I'm not going to say the name of it, and it was a good place to work, but just obviously just keep their privacy. And I had to do extensive repairs to their equipment the first week I was by myself as a technician, but I didn't have to actually replace any parts. It's because they stored the machine in this room that was like a hot room. Like, it was just 120 degrees and full of steam. It was just corroding the electrical connectors and causing connection problems. So I'm in there for 3 hours replacing electrical connectors and scraping gunk off of contacts and cleaning everything up. And I had to explain that to them so they didn't get a bill and be like, why was there 3 hours no parts replaced? So I actually brought them, like, some of the connectors I replaced, the old ones that were corroded and about fell off. I brought that to them before I left to show them so they would understand.
Yeah. What about as far as communication? What kind of problems did you see communication wise that you had with your peers or with your supervisor?
When I started the main communication, there was a helpline where you can talk to veteran technicians to get help. And when I called them, I didn't tell them I was a new tech. I just told them that I was, having troubleshooting a machine. I didn't know how to talk to them. I I didn't know how to approach him. So the guy just kind of like got aggressive with me and told me he has other people on the line. I need to just go fix it. So then I explained to him, and I knew after that fact, I knew to start like this. I explained to him, like, I'm a new tech here, and I found this, and this problem, and it's got the machine partially running, but I'm still having this, and this problem. Instead of instead of telling them that it wasn't, I knew how to start the conversation more efficiently with the lead technician that was helping me troubleshoot.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's final. I kind of look at leadership as in whatever level of leadership you're in, is like you're the computer and you have all of these sensors out there, and these sensors are telling you what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And without that direct communication between sensor and computer, then you don't understand what it is that needs to be done if you're not getting that constant feedback. And I think that's really why it is that you, like you said, once after that first call, the next time you knew to tell them you were a new technician, so they'd have a better reference of, oh, okay, well, he's probably has the skills. He's just not familiar with the equipment he's working on.
And that's exactly right. And then I knew to tell him, at least by following that, I knew to tell him at least one important troubleshooting step immediately. Like I'm getting power here, but then it's not making it here, for example. That way
Yes.
they knew, at least they had an idea of where to start with me. Because when I first called, I was kind of dead in the water, expecting them to like hold my hand, and they didn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Being a technician, especially like we were remote techs. It wasn't often that we encountered each other personally while we were on the clock, but um, uh, being able to email, send pictures, talk to each other, do do FaceTimes and stuff like that, where we could actually put our own eyes on your problem. That was always those were always great tools to have. Uh, to kind of really see what was really what was kind of one, to see the environment that you were in, so you understood what your capabilities were going to be and what you were limited to. I mean, that's an important thing to understand. And sometimes, the environment's just not going to be ideal, and it makes it that much harder to do your job. Whether the environment is that uh, um, the customer has put you in. Of course, if it's an unsafe environment, that's when you need to get your manager involved.
Yeah.
Let them contact the customer, let the customer know that, you know, that until it is in a safer environment to work in, we'd be unable to work on it. That's it. That's another thing in communication is, in the work that we've done, there's a very big hazard when it comes to electrical stuff.
Yeah.
And so you have to keep that in mind, and then also keep in mind then, okay, you're working on electrical stuff. What's my environment looking like around where I'm working? And that gives you a better idea of what it is you can and cannot get away with. Uh, but those are a lot of things that most of the time you don't have enough time when you're working with a new trainee. You kind of got to beat that really into them as quickly as possible, because everybody needs to go home and go home safely. And safety communication is not just paramount, but safety's paramount. But you have to be able to communicate safety issues. And that's the number one. That's the number one thing. I know we worked with some, a lot of DC powered stuff, but a lot of the AC powered stuff we worked with, that's really if you're not being careful, that's really where
Mhm.
problems can happen, the risks of electrocution and making sure, I had
Yeah.
a customer at a food processing plant had me working on um, AC powered stuff in their freezer. And I just said, hey, look, I can't work, you know, on this equipment in this environment because one, need to keep my senses sharp. And if I can't do that because my hands are too cold, I can't operate my tools correctly. Those are issues where the customer's going to have to change the environment in which they're working in, and because it's really it's I would rather the customer be angry for a second than to be in a hospital or dead.
Yeah,
You know, yeah,
like, and that's like another thing you can do too when you have a new technician is you can project the scenario that you're going to run up on when you're driving to the site on the way to the site. You can tell them, like, give them some foresight. Say, I'm going to ask the customer to move this machine because it's going to be in a dangerous location. So always remember to do that before you start your work. Look around and make sure it's safe to start your work. You can talk about that stuff while you're on the road between service calls.
absolutely, absolutely. And that time in between jobs where you're training, that's a good time to really try to get to know somebody. Not just on a personal level, but get to know them on a professional level. Kind of get to know um, how it is that they think, how it is that they see the job, um, you know, kind of get an idea of their experience, and that gives you as a trainer the um, I guess more of the insight on what it is you think they would really benefit from, and what you should probably kind of condense your time down to and work with that trainee.
Yeah.
What issues are better to work with and spend more time on than it would be. Then your time is better spent here than it is over here talking about something. So I'm like, if this is somebody like myself who has had repeated OSHA training, you know maybe talking safety isn't as important as uh, talking about the way these machines or this equipment or whatever it is, this widget or whatever it is that we'd be working on, your time may be better spent getting them kind of knowing the equipment rather than it is uh, dealing with safety issues,
Mhm.
especially if it's a veteran technician that's just new to the industry, but not necessarily new to, new to that uh, company.
So, and I'm gonna build on that. So, if you have a new technician and they're established, and you know that, and you talk to them and they understand theory well in this area, but you have a machine that tends to have a lot of problems that aren't easily predicted with that troubleshooting method. It's a troubleshooting method that's kind of like you have to learn on that job because it's kind of unique to that equipment. Then you want to try and look through your service calls and make sure you go to at least one or two service calls with that kind of equipment with a new technician, instead of all your service calls being what you already think they'll be more familiar with. Try to line up the schedule to bring them around as many new things as possible. Don't just keep showing them what they already know.
Yeah, I know, like when we worked together, when we worked at the same company, you know, finding the literature for the types of machines we were working on was probably one of the biggest
Oh,
things, I think, for new hires was finding the literature.
yeah.
You know, that was frustrating. I know for me, I had a hard time finding it, and a lot of my first calls on to tech support was just to
Yeah.
uh, explain to me how I get to the manual for the machine. And a lot of that had to do with company design. The way they design things just wasn't necessarily the best. But once you did figure it out, it just took some time. And once you did figure it out, it went a whole lot easier. But again, that's another form of communication is here's all the information you're ever going to need. But if you don't know how to get there, if you don't know how to find it, then you're not being communicated to in order to be able to repair. And, those are just some of the more difficult uh, things you have to work with, I guess, in really any industry where you're doing service calls, service technician work.
No, that's spot on. Especially, well, that's more specific to that company, but if you could teach a linear troubleshooting method to the technician before you even touch the machine, just pull up a picture and just tell them and imagine the movement from you hitting the power switch to go into the computer, and you just kind of point at the piece of paper or a picture, not even the schematics, just a piece of paper of the machine in general. And just to, point at it and say, here, you flip this switch and then you hit this pan, and then you kind of like use your finger and hit the different points that the electricity had to go. And it has to go through all these points before it goes to the next. So they'll just know a linear path to at least just get started. You got to give them a general idea just to kind of like know which direction to look. Because that sounds obvious, but it's not. Because you'll look at it and think power, motor, but in this machine, it might have to hit this interface, and there's two computer modules, depending if you want to go fast or slow. So you have to explain that. And then
Yeah, I mean, that's it, and having being able to get the literature, get the manual and be able to pull up a schematic just so you can see the path
yeah,
is really, it's not necessarily, what you might know up here, as much as what information's available to you. And, that way you don't have to memorize everything, because that'd just kind of be impossible. But experience will give you intuition.
yes,
And that intuition can then replace whether or not you need to go to a manual or not. If you start working on one particular type of machine all the time, and you get used to that machine, and you already start to know, what's going to fail on it. And that brings me back to the point I was making in the beginning, is that, that's a part of, being able to present confidence is once you know a machine well enough, you already have an idea of what you need to do. I've called a customer and said, okay, this is the complaint I'm getting. Can you give me something while I'm on my way there? And then as soon as I get there, I've worked on these machines so many times, and I could literally just get there, look at something, and in 5 minutes have a diagnosis and tell the customer, hey, this is what it is. I can order you a part. Here's the cost. And, it maybe take me more time to prepare a quote for the customer than it would for me to even diagnose the problem. So, that's just going to come with experience. But, until then, getting the information you need on whatever it is you're working on and having that readily available is one of the best ways that companies can communicate with their technicians without necessarily even having to say a word.
And I'm going to build on that. I like that as well. And if you're a new tech, that's also a good thing to do, because you can call them, and yeah, we got a couple minutes left, but you can call them, and then when they tell you, you can understand one or two of the problems, even if you don't understand everything. You can come up there with the part to replace one or two problems as soon as you walk in the door, and that builds some confidence to report with you. Even if you still need to troubleshoot, you've walked in and gained some rapport. You built some rapport immediately anyway. So it's gonna make that learning process smoother, because you hit the ground running.
Yeah, and that's another thing, and this happened with me, as I'm sure it happened with other technicians, is that sometimes even if your area changes, you will have customers that only want you to come out there, and that is sometimes it's not the best for managing the efficiency of your day. But then again, the goal of your day is to be pleasing the customer, and and your boss wants to please the customer, and so it may not be ideal for you to have to drive 30 minutes to an hour out of your way from your normal area, but the customer only wants you to come out there because you are that efficient, you're that quick, and you communicate well with them, and and uh, that can be an expectation to have. It's difficult in the sense that it may take away from how much work you're able to get done in a day, but what it does is it does show and it does communicate to your supervisor that you are good at your job.
Yeah.
And those are the things that uh I don't want to have to tell my boss I'm good at something. I
Yeah.
want the customer to tell my boss that I'm good at something.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that, and one way or I guess one way that that's conveyed, is by them exclusively wanting to have you come out there and do the work.
So,
And
sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, well, workaround, because when you were on vacation, I had to do some of the service calls in your route. And when I would
Right.
call the customer to see what was wrong, they'd be like, we only want Philip. So what I would tell them is that Philip helped train me to help build some confidence in me, even though they never met me before. And then and sometimes I would tell them, like, Philip told me that at this job, this machine tends to have this problem. He prepped me before I even came here to help you. And that would help me build a rapport with them through your name before, as soon as I meet them. And they would just, because I would meet them, they didn't want me there. And then I mentioned your name, that that we talked about you. And then they would just give me, their face would lighten up and they would give me a chance at that point.
Yeah, well, this is still something that I preach to anybody who's in any type of customer service, is that the best way to give good customer service is be proficient in your skill set.
Yeah.
And the more proficient you are in your skill set, the more confident the customer is going to be having you there. And at the end of the day, that's what makes that's what makes you money. That's what gets you home safe.
That's what
That's what,
shake your hand.
yes, that's what's going to keep the repeat business coming, is being proficient in your skills. And that means, you're going to have to drop some ego, and you're going to have to drop some pride,
Yeah.
and and be willing to learn, always being willing to learn. That's always what's going to make you a better technician, is being willing to learn. And you
Yeah.
can't you can't make able men willing,
Yeah.
but you're able to make willing men able.
That's true.
And that's definitely a philosophy I live by. And I think that, especially when it comes to a new trainee, you know um, if they're willing, then we can get them able, and that's the thing. And so that's the kind of stuff I would communicate, um, to people I'm training, is that, hey, as long as you keep your ego down, be willing to learn, you're going to do fine. You're going to be all right, and so I mean, trusting the process, that's really um, one of the best ways to communicate to a trainee.
Yeah. It is
Just
a
trust the process. I've trained guys that came out of a completely different industry, but their skill set was just top notch, and they never called me again.
Yeah.
They went back to their areas, and I never heard from them again. And these were usually technicians that came in from out of state. Uh, I know the Birmingham area in Alabama, they didn't have any veterans there, and so they didn't really have any people to train their new hires. So they were sending them to us over here in Atlanta, and these uh, being able to have those guys for a few weeks you
Yeah.
know, and get them. But then, you know, they would go back to Birmingham and I would never hear from them again, you know, and um, that's really good, you know, as far as it goes. But that's kind of the exception. I think, you know, most trainees, especially if they're new to that particular industry,
Yeah.
uh, you know, having 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 a willingness to learn is going to be the key to their success in the beginning.
Well, I learned that from you because I'm not naturally mechanically inclined, and I really struggled. But you kind of told me that, and a lot of things you said, about how to change my attitude and lower my ego. And I just had to kind of bite my lip and just do it. But after a while, like my ratings were in like the top 20% of the technicians for the company, and I did that because of the advice you and Charles gave me.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not a natural technician. I had to eat crow and learn, but I did, and it worked.
yeah. I know on the commercial side, um, I was top 20 in the nation most of the year.
Yeah.
You know, at least half the year, if not more, I was in the top 20. Times when I didn't, you know, those are really more to do with health reasons than it was anything else.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah,
Well, I think we're about to run out of time. Is there another gem you want to drop before we go?
um, man, just never stop communicating. Always
There you are. Okay.
your boss is abreast of what's going on, and you know if you need help, reach out. There's no shame in asking for help, uh, and you know build
Report.
some good rapport with your peers,
Yeah.
because they will help you.
And if you're good to your customers, they'll defend you after a year or two. If you could service them, they'll actually some of them will defend you and be on your side as well.
Yeah, and
And
don't rat on your coworker.
yeah, just talk to them directly. I mean, not saying let it slide, but have a man-to-man talk with them.
Yeah, that's it. You know, if you feel like somebody needs some help in an area, then you know explain that to that to your coworker.
Yeah.
Don't be a tattletale. You know, it it doesn't make you look good.
Yeah, and in the technician field, I know in a lot of businesses you want to stay away from your boss and try to stay off the radar. But like you said, that your boss talks to a lot of customers. So in this field, you really do need to build a rapport with your boss. It's
Oh yeah, absolutely.
you're in
Yeah,
the environment.
yeah. If you have especially if you have a really good boss like we've been fortunate to have, you know, communicating with them is pretty easy. And you know, if you can't communicate with your boss, then you're um, there may be some other issues that that may need to be addressed. So, but yeah, that man, that's unless you got any other questions, you anything, I think that's about all I got.
No, I really enjoyed it. But yeah, I mean, we could go on all day, but you mentioned the basics. What you need to do is kind of take the blueprint of what you said, and you have to build a version of that for yourself. But you've given the blueprint to work on, and then you just take that and you implement it yourself, and it won't take you but a few weeks to really start to go, oh, okay. It won't once you're out in the field. What you just said, it kind of makes sense, but it'll make sense real fast when you get out in the field, and before you know it, if you take that blueprint you gave your skills and you also feel better about you become a better technician for it because you're not going to be going all over the place. You're going to be more focused, but you're also going to be happier and less stressed.